Today we're reading The Wishmakers, chapters 7 through 9. Chapter 7. At last I was standing on the ground again. It had been an awkward transition passing through the doorway from the ceiling. It took Ridge, Tina, and Val working together to put me right again, and they all stumbled down the trailer steps with me on their shoulders. The Moo Moo neighbor had gone back inside her mobile home, so the four of us stood outside Anderson's spotty yard arguing. Just tell us what you learned about the missing page, Val said. I'm not so sure I want to, I replied. I was feeling much more confident with my feet on the ground. It's our quest to stop Thackeray, but you two are trying to save his life. Well, you're not planning on killing him, are you? Tina asked. Of course not, I said. Though that would surely stop him from opening the undiscovered genie jar. Then what does it hurt to let us come with you? Tina pressed. It's the best lead we have for our quest, and it's probably safer to go together. Tina had a point. It might be useful to see how another wishmaker navigated her wishes. We've got a long ways to go, I said. Let's get started. A long ways? Tina repeated. Yeah, I replied. We won't be back for a couple of days, maybe longer. Tina shifted uncomfortably. Okay, but there's something I have to do before we leave. What? I asked. There was something more important than her quest? Tina fidgeted under my stare. Don't worry about it. Just something personal. I can meet you at the southeast edge of town in 3 hours. How about Dilly's Diner on 12th Street? I narrowed my eyes suspiciously at her. Fine, don't be late. Without another word, Tina and Val moved down the gravel road of the trailer park, leaving Ridge and me standing side by side. The girls were a mysterious team, and I felt lucky that Wolf Vale hadn't eaten me when they first surprised us. Can I turn you into a wolf? I asked Ridge. I can do anything you wish, he said. I thought back in our encounter inside the trailer. I never heard Tina wish it, I said. She just pressed some funny word and Val turned from a wolf into a girl. I don't know, Ridge said. I've never encountered anything like that. I took a deep breath. Do you trust them? No reason not to so far, Ridge said. But they're all being secretive, I said. They're girls. Where do you think they're going? Tina and Val had moved out of sight now, and the most brilliant plan came to me. Let's follow them. I bent my knees and leapt forward, sprawling clumsily on the patchy, dry grass. Are you okay? Ridge shouted, rushing to help me up. What happened to flying? I dusted myself off. You didn't wish for it. Oh, yes, I did. I wished that I could fly to Thackeray Anderton's house. Ridge pointed back at the Anderton's trailer, and I realized my mistake. The way I worded my wish meant I could no longer fly now that I have reached Thackeray's house. I said. Can I wish to fly again? I hadn't really thought about asking for the same thing more than once, but it seemed a shame since I had cleaned myself of the bird droppings. You can, Ridge explained, but the consequence will be different every time you ask. So I just keep asking until I get a consequence that I like? I don't think you'll like any of them, answered Ridge. The universe knows you. Even though the consequences will be different, there'll be equal disadvantages. So if I wish to fly again, it won't result in bird poop, but it'll result in something that I hate just as much. Probably, Ridge answered. Though between you and me, I'm hoping you wish for a mode of transportation that doesn't require me to travel in the jar. Yeah, flying wasn't all it was cracked up to be. It was tiring, messy, and punished Ridge. I was sure I could think of something else, but in the meantime, we set out on foot, sneaking up on Tina and Val. And then Keeping our distance, we tracked them along. I thought back to the trailer when my quick wish had landed me on the ceiling. I needed to be prepared to make better wishes. Is this is there any wish that you can't fulfill? I asked Ridge as we walked. Well, you already know I can't let you unwish a wish, he said. And I can't let you wish to remove a consequence. Other than that, I think you're free to ask for anything. What about knowledge? I asked. What if I wish for it? The universe can tell me anything I want to know, right? As long as you accept the consequence, Ridge said. What do you need to know? The moment didn't seem right. Walking down an unknown street at the edge of town, but I knew I had to ask him sooner or later. Wasn't that the reason I had accepted the universe's quest? I mean, sure, I wanted to prevent the zombie pet apocalypse, but that wasn't what had spurred me to follow Ridge out the door of the Lindens' home. Ridge was a genie. He could give me unlimited wishes. He could answer a question that had burned in my mind for as long as I could remember. So why was it so hard to make that wish? Why couldn't I ask him where I came from, who my parents were, and why I ended up so alone? We'd been following Tina and Val for nearly an hour when they arrived at their destination, St. Mercy's Hospital. I froze. My hand strayed into my pocket, and I flicked my thumbnail across the edge of the tattered card I always carried. You all right? Ridge asked me. I looked at him. The universe would be able to tell me. All I had to do was ask Ridge, but part of me was too afraid to find out my past. I pulled my hand out of my pocket. I'm fine, I said. Taking a deep breath, I followed Tina and Val through the front doors. I hadn't been to this hospital before, but they all seemed so alike. The same colors, same smell, same clothing. I thought back to when I had first awakened in that hospital bed. It had been over 3 years ago, and I was just as confused as I was back then. Tina paused at the stairs, conversing with a uniformed security guard. We hung back until the guard stepped aside and let the girls go up the stairs. Why would they come here? Ridge said. Let's find out, I said, moving across the lobby. The same security guard dropped us at the bottom of the stairs, but he didn't seem so friendly now. Visiting hours are over, boys, he said. What about those girls? I pressed. She has special arrangements with the patients in room 214, the guard answered. You can come back in the morning. Special arrangements, I muttered as Ridge and I walked back outside. A moment later, we stood awkwardly on the sidewalk of the hospital. You could always wish to get in, Ridge said. Yeah, I said, and accept another dumb consequence. I looked at the hospital, trying to decide how badly I wanted to spy on Tina. I had the perfect wish. Might as well see what it would cost me. I wished to be invisible. Forever? Ridge asked. What? No, I answered. Just for the next 10 minutes or so. Enough to get past that security guard. Ridge nodded in understanding as my watch clicked open. If you want to become invisible, then all your clothes will remain invisible for a day. Ah, I cried, stepping behind a shrub in case my clothes suddenly vanished. That's terrible. What if I put on new clothes? Ridge shrugged. They will also disappear. There's no way I could accept. They were supposed to team up with Tina and Val soon. Face it, you wouldn't accept that crazy deal either. No way, I said, feeling my hourglass watch close. I stepped up from behind the shrub. These consequences are impossible. Remember what I said about making direct wishes, Ridge said. You always wish big, so the consequence usually seems too steep. If you walk into that hospital and turn invisible, then the wish did all the work for you. So what I guess I'm saying is think smaller. Think smaller, I repeated. A grin came across my face. I wish I could be 3 inches tall until I get to room 214. My hourglass popped up again, and Ridge was nodding his approval at my wish. If you want to shrink down, he explained, then every time you visit a bathroom, you'll have toilet paper stuck to your shoe for an hour. Well, that would be embarrassing. Just my shoe? I asked. What if I'm barefoot? Bare feet count too, said Ridge. How much toilet paper? I asked. If it was just half a square, maybe nobody will notice. Then again, if it was an entire roll dragging around, then it could be a major tripping hazard. About 14 inches, Ridge answered, holding up his hands to show me the length. That's manageable, I said. How long will this go on? The rest of the week, Ridge said. Once the quest ends, your shoes will be toilet paper free. I could handle that. It would be worth a bit of embarrassment for the week so I could snoop on Tina's secret. Bazing, I said the magic word, and just like that, I was 3 inches tall. Chapter 8. The world looks very different when you're the size of a mouse. The sidewalk sprawled before me like a parking lot, and the hospital loomed at such a height I could barely see the top. It was going to take a long time to walk anywhere since my legs were now half the length of toothpicks. I turned to look at Ridge and found myself staring at a ginormous shoe, the white sole nearly coming to my waist. I guess I had foolishly assumed that Ridge would also shrink with me. Obviously, he had remained regular size. I guess I'll have to put you in a jar, I shouted. My voice must have been too faint for Ridge to hear. He dropped to the knees on a sidewalk, his head bending low. We were nearly at the same level. Whoa, I shouted, surprised by the massive size of the face before me. I think I could crawl into your nostril. Why would you do that? Ridge whispered, but his voice was still plenty loud. I don't want to, I said. I was just pointing out that your nose is huge. My nose is the same size it's always been, Ridge said. You're just really tiny now. I shrugged at him. I'll have to put you in the jar to get past the security guard, I repeated. But you should get me as close to the stairs as you can so I don't have to walk too far. Ridge reached out, tucking his thumb under one of his arms and his index finger under the other. With a gentle squeeze, he lifted me off the sidewalk, and I clung to his hand as Ridge took a few steps and passed through the automatic hospital doors. Once inside, he found the corner of the lobby and took a knee, depositing me behind a fake potted plant. I dug into my backpack and pulled out the empty peanut butter jar. Ridge, I said, holding the container, get into the jar. I was grateful that the universe shielded us from suspicion because Ridge instantly turned into a puff of dark smoke and got sucked into the jar in my hands. I took a deep breath and focused on the giant stairs across the lobby. The security guard who had stopped us earlier wouldn't be much of a threat since I could slip past him unnoticed. There was definitely no way for me to climb the stairs at my current height. Are we there yet? Ridge asked like an annoying child on a road trip. I didn't have the heart to tell him that I hadn't even moved. It takes a long time to get around when you're barely bigger than a Lego figure, I said, dropping the jar into my overstuffed backpack. Nearby, a man was walking and talking with someone at the front desk. His laptop bag was on the floor by his feet. I decided that was my chance. Here we go, I whispered, more to encourage myself than to inform Ridge of my plan. I sprinted towards the man, my tiny heart racing in my miniaturized chest. I reached my ride and skidded to a halt. The laptop bag was a mountain of thick black cloth. Above my head, I saw a pocket where I could easily stow away, but reaching it was going to be a challenge. Jumping as high as I could, I caught the zipper and pulled myself up. Dangling precariously, I swung one leg toward the empty pocket. I probably would have been able to successfully slip and slide if the man hadn't picked up the bag at that very moment. There was a jolt at the handle, and as the handles went tight, I toppled backwards, barely catching the zipper as the floor fell away beneath me. I hung there, both my hands gripping the loop at the end of the zippered tab. With every step the man took, I thought I might shake loose. The floor seemed like it was 50 feet below me, and the tiles were a blur as my carrier walked briskly towards the stairs. What's going on? Ridge's muffled voice called from the jar in my backpack. I don't know how much longer I can stand this. My carrier man took the stairs 2 steps at a time, looping his backpack over one shoulder, increased the distance between me and the floor. I hoisted myself up, putting one leg through the loop at the end of the zipper tab, and bracing as I pulled Ridge's jar from my backpack. We reached the second floor, and the man strode down the hallway like he was in a hurry. I saw room numbers, but they looked like gibberish squiggles since I couldn't read. I needed Ridge to have a look around. We're riding in a laptop bag, I said into the jar. It was one of those sentences I never imagined myself saying. We've got to get down, but it's too high to jump. I'm going to pull you out of the jar when I jump, and you need to catch me before I hit the floor. I hoped Ridge would answer with something like, "Of course. Sounds easy. I'm an excellent catch." Instead, he simply said, "I'm so itchy." I pulled my foot up to brace against the zipper, readied myself, and leaped from the man's bag. As I plummeted towards the hallway tiles, I squeaked out the command, "Ridge, get out of the jar!" With a puff of black smoke, the genie appeared, but not exactly how I thought he would. Maybe it was because I was holding the jar sideways that Ridge landed on his shoulders, skidding to a halt against the wall. My flight path landed me right in his mass of curly hair. I suppose it was better than splatting on the floor, but the impact knocked the breath right out of my lungs. Ridge leaped to his feet. I held on for dear life, grabbing 2 fistfuls of his hair like horse reins. "We have to get to room 214. "Ace," Ridge said, wandering down the hallway. "Where are you?" "I hear your voice, but I can't see you." He spun around in a dizzying circle. "I'm sorry I didn't catch you. Are you a ghost now?" "I'm in your hair," I shouted, sitting down right on top Ridge's head. That's when I got big again. Ridge crumbled to the floor with a surprised yelp as I slid down in a heap beside him. "There you are," he exclaimed. "This is room 214, he pointed to the door in front of us. "Shh," I hissed, holding a finger to my lips. If Tina was inside that room, I didn't want her knowing that Ridge and I were sneaking around out here. We rose to our knees, pointed with our ears to the door. What are they doing in there? It really bothered me that Tina hadn't told me her reason for coming here. I glanced at Ridge. I wish I could hear through this door. I was aware of my hourglass watch opening up, but I didn't even look at it. Instead, I kept my focus on Ridge. "If you want to hear through this hospital door," he explained, "the next time you plug your ears, your fingers will get stuck to them." "Seriously?" I whispered. "For how long?" "Only half an hour." "Only," I hissed. Did I really want to run around with my fingers in my ears for 30 minutes? That depended upon how badly I wanted to know what Tina was talking about behind the door. To get this far, I'd already accepted a week of toilet paper stuck to my shoe. I grunted. "I guess I'll take it." Bazing. Suddenly, I could hear everything going on inside the room, as though the doors were wide open. There was a soft humming with an occasional beep from some machines, the gentle rustle of blankets on a bed, and then I heard Tina's voice, as clearly as I thought she was talking to me. There was only one problem. Tina was speaking Spanish. "What's she saying?" Ridge asked. "Who's she talking to?" What a waste of a wish. Hearing through the door was useless if I couldn't understand what they were saying. "No comprendo," I said to Ridge. "Tina's speaking Spanish." Then I heard a woman's voice reply in the same language. What if the stranger and Tina were making nefarious plans to turn against me? I wish I could understand Spanish. It seemed like the best option. "Well, if you want to know Spanish," said Ridge, "then you'll only be able to speak French the rest of the week." "Do you speak French?" I asked. "Si, senor," he answered. "I'm pretty sure that was Spanish," I pointed out. Said Ridge. "Then nope, I guess I don't speak French." "But you speak Spanish?" I was rather impressed. "Un, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco, seis," Ridge repeated. "That's all I got." I was less impressed. "Well," Ridge gestured to my hourglass, "are you going to take the consequence?" Something told me that would be a bad idea. Stopping Thackeray was probably going to be hard enough, even with Ridge and me speaking the same language. "I don't accept," I said, my shoulders sagging slightly in defeat. Maybe I'll just take a peek inside. I reached out slowly and gripped the door handle of Tina's mysterious meeting. I pushed the door inward just enough to see Tina and Vale standing at the floor of the hospital bed. I got a clear glimpse of the patient, too. I didn't know what sort of illness she had, but the Hispanic woman looked like she was in pain, every breath causing her face to wince from the discomfort. She had a dozen tubes draped around her, an oxygen mask on her face. I was seeing it correctly. The woman's ear looked like it had been attached upside down. Tina didn't seem to notice my intrusion, so I risked pushing the door open just a little further to see if anyone else was in there. And then the door came off its hinges, crashing to the floor with a deafening bang. Chapter 9. I was just grateful that the heavy door didn't crush anyone when it came off its hinges. You see, I had sort of forgotten about that consequence. So Ridge and I did the sensible thing. As soon as the door fell, we ran. Of course, Tina spotted us by the time we got outside. She and Vale caught up. "You followed me?" Tina shouted. "I can't believe you two." "It was Ace's idea," Ridge said. I shot him a glare and tried to explain to the girls that I had to see what they were up to. "For all I know, you could be secretly working with Thackeray Anderson." I glanced back at the hospital. "Who was that woman you were talking to?" Tina took a couple of deep breaths. Then, when she spoke, it didn't answer my question at all. "We're basically down to 6 days now if we want to complete our quests. Then we'd better get moving." She set off at a brisk pace in the opposite direction of the hospital, Val jogging to stay close. "Hey," I shouted. "Where are you going?" "You tell me," Tina called back. "You're the one with all the information on how to find Thackeray." I sighed, moving hastily to catch up with her. Arguing with the disruption was only going to make for a longer quest. As I moved, I swung my backpack around and pulled out a couple of sandwiches. If Tina was hungry, as I was, then maybe she'd take this as a peace offering. I handed one to Ridge and extended 2 others to Tina and Val. "You want a sandwich?" I asked. "I have plenty." To prove my point, I pulled open my backpack so they could see how stuffed it was. "What's with the sandwiches?" Val asked, taking one. I shrugged, shouldering my backpack. "I like peanut butter. Is that a crime?" I didn't feel like explaining how my first wish had been for something so ridiculous. I peeled back the plastic bag and took a bite. Ridge muttered to me. "These are so good." Tina glanced at me from the side of her eyes and then snatched a sandwich that I still held out for her. "Who would have thought?" I said, chuckling, trying desperately for conversation. "Peanut butter." I took another bite. Was Val's creamy or crunchy? "Hey," Val cut into it. "You calling me chunky?" "No," I stammered. "I mean the jar." "What are you talking about?" Tina finally said through a mouthful. I fumbled in my backpack once more, producing Ridge's jar for her inspection. "Didn't Val come out of one of these?" Tina reached into her pocket and withdrew a small item. It was a little jar of lip balm, raspberry flavored. The lid was missing, but the red balm didn't appear to smudge onto anything. "This is Val's genie jar." I felt a tiny pang of jealousy. Not that I wanted to carry around a jar of raspberry lip balm, but look at that size. It was a fraction of the peanut butter jar I had to lug around. "But," I stammered, "your lips are chapped." "Really?" Tina smirked and tucked the jar back into her pocket. "We should talk about where we're going. What did you learn from that page in the notebook?" "I learned that we've got a long ways to go," I said. "Anybody been to Mount Rushmore?" Tina shook her head. "Have you?" she asked me. "Not that I remember," I said, giving my standard reply. I knew I hadn't been to Mount Rushmore in the last 3 years, but before I really had no idea what I'd done, and it was frustrating to have a blank memory. "What about you two?" I asked Ridge and Val. She took a bite of a sandwich and kept walking. "Mount Rushmore," Ridge said. "That's the one with the big faces carved in the mountainside, right?" "Yeah," I said. 4 presidents of the United States." "Ever wonder what happened to the rest of their bodies?" Ridge asked. "I mean, it's kind of freaky to just have a bunch of floating heads." "How are we going to get there?" Tina asked. "Mount Rushmore's in South Dakota, and that's way too far to walk." "We'll have to wish for something," I said. "Ugh," Tina grunted. I figured out within the first hour that it's better to do as little wishing as possible. I can't deal with these consequences. You seem to be doing fine, I said, polishing off my sandwich and stuffing the empty bag into my pocket. What have you got so far? Tina shot me a disapproving glance. Seems kind of impolite to ask another person about her consequences. Sorry, I replied, but my apology seemed to spur Tina into telling me anyways. Next time I eat ice cream, it'll taste like olives. One of my fingernails can't be trimmed for a whole year, and I can't tell blue or orange apart for the next week. So the sky looks orange to you? I asked. Not at the moment, of course. It was practically dark. She nodded. It's weird. I couldn't help but chuckle at Tina's misfortune. But what did you wish for? Lots of things, she answered thoughtfully. But there were only a few things I could accept. I know what you mean. Tina looked at me conspicuously, wiped her cheek. She kept staring persistently, scraping at a spot on her mouth. You've got some leftovers, she finally said. My hand shot up to my face, only to encounter the everlasting smudge of peanut butter. That's a flavor saver, I said. Gross, she replied. But it got her to smile. You think your consequences are bad, said Val. You should hear some of my previous wishmakers. I bet you've got lots of stories, Tina said. Val nodded. I once had a wishmaker who grew an upside down mustache for a year. What's an upside down mustache? I asked. You know, the hair grows upside down instead of down. That would be awful, I said, unconsciously scratching my upper lip. Yeah. Val took one last bite of her sandwich. She hated it. How many wishmakers have you had? I asked the question to both genies, but only Val responded. Too many. Do most of them succeed at their quests? I asked. Most, she answered. That was reassuring, at least. Odds were in our favor. I turned to Tina. You never told me your quest consequence, I said. You're supposed to save the life of an ex-wishmaker, but what happens if you don't? Bad stuff, she answered. Basically the end of the world. Hey, me too. I said it like we had the same pair of shoes, not like we were talking about the world ending. If I don't succeed, said Tina, the whole world will be flooded with lemonade. I happen to like lemonade, I said. Tina gave me a deadpan look. Not if it causes the end of the world. Floods can destroy huge cities, not to mention that lemonade is acidic. Nothing will survive for long. She had a good point. I would never have thought the world could end by lemonade. If I don't stop Thackeray Anderton, I said, then all the cats and dogs in the world will turn into zombies and eat everyone. Do you have any pets? I had a poodle, she replied. Undead poodle, I said. Sounds ferocious. Tina laughed for a brief second. Whatever worries she carried seemed to melt away. A world-ending consequence isn't very common, Val said. Wishmakers often have consequences that would cause earthquakes, start wars, wreck economies, destroy chocolate. Tina and I gave her a puzzled look. I'm serious, she said. I had one wishmaker who had 7 days to pick a leaf from a very old tree in Patagonia. If he failed, chocolate would go extinct. I said in a mock thought. No more chocolate. I held up my hands as if weighing the consequences. Versus zombie pets destroying humanity? Don't downplay it, Ace, Ridge cut in. Imagine a world without chocolate, he said with a hint of desperation in his voice. Imagine a world without people, I replied, reminding him what was expected of Tina and me. It didn't seem fair that the universe had put that kind of responsibility on us. I guess I should have read the fine print on the genie's warning label. All right.